You are enough. And you don't have to take on everything by yourself.
Hello and welcome to Love as a Business Strategy, a podcast that brings humanity to the workplace. We're here to talk about business, but we want to tackle topics that most business leaders shy away from. And we believe that humanity and love should be at the center of every successful business. I'm your host, Jeff Ma, and as always, I'm here to have conversations and hear stories from real people about real businesses and real life. My guest today is Scott Mautz. Scott is a former senior executive of Procter & Gamble, where he successfully ran several of the company's largest multi-billion-dollar businesses. He's the author of 4 multi-award-winning best-selling books, including his latest, The Mentally Strong Leader: Build the Habits to Productively Regulate Your Emotions, Thoughts, and Behaviors. Scott is faculty on reserve at Indiana University's Kelley School of Business for Executive Education, and he's also a popular course instructor on LinkedIn Learning, where his courses have been taken over 1.5 million times. Scott has been named a CEO thought leader by the CEO Executive Guild and a top 50 leadership innovator by Inc.com, where his column drew nearly 2 million readers a month. And I am honored and privileged to have Scott here on the show today to chat with us just a little bit about mentally strong leaders. So, Scott, welcome to the show. How are you doing today?
Thanks to have me here. I'll have to meet that guy you just described. Yeah, I don't know. He sounds kind of cool.
It's always weird to have all our accomplishments laid out.
I know. Oh,
it
makes me cringe, but hey, the people got to know I know what I'm talking about. So
sure, absolutely. They can Google you. There's a way. I didn't even cover everything. The Google has a lot more in store. So thank you so much for making the time to be here today. I have a question I like to start with out of genuine curiosity for myself as a human. Scott, what is your passion and how did you find it?
my passion, unquestionably, is helping others become better versions of themselves, which I bet, Jeff, you share a lot of that DNA strand, just given the nature of your very show. And I learned that about myself growing up in the corporate world. I spent, multiple decades in the corporate world, and just finding that I was always drawn, of course, to building the business and building results and doing better than we did last year. But I was even more drawn to the human side of that, which is why I'm so drawn to this podcast. And I'm a fan of this podcast, the ability to help people become better versions of themselves by introducing tools, introducing insights that help them to get there. And I've been doing that, speaking about, in that area, and teaching workshops and keynotes and writing books about, that area of helping people to become better versions of themselves for quite a long time now. So it's a passion that's kind of carried through my life.
Amazing. And there was a slew of things that I wanted to talk to you about, and we had to narrow it down a little bit. And so here we are to dive into mental strength, or the mentally strong leader. And I'd love if you could kick us off with what that even means by your definition. What is a mentally strong leader?
Yeah, I'll define it, and then I think it'll become pretty clear how it ties into, love and the theme of the podcast. So mental strength is, by definition, the ability, Jeff, to regulate your emotions, your thoughts, and your behaviors productively for productive outcomes, no matter the circumstances, even in the face of adversity. So said another way, it's managing internally so you can lead externally. And here's the thing, Jeff. I think most of your listeners know intuitively that if they want to be successful at work and in life, they have to be able to self-regulate their emotions, their thoughts, and their behaviors. But this just in, it's really hard to do that. It's like really hard to regulate your emotions, your thoughts, and your behaviors in a productive way. But, the good news is, through The Mentally Strong Leader, the book that I've been working on for years, and the new book, the good news is that if you can build the habits behind increasing your mental strength, it's actually like training your brain for achievement. It's the cheat code for achievement. And I'll talk a little bit later about the research that has proven the connection between mental strength and achievement. It might be surprising that the extent of it to some of your listeners. It's what makes mental strength, the leadership and self-leadership superpower of our times because it is so hard to self-regulate your emotions, thoughts, and behaviors. But when you can do it, it is so clearly linked to achievement. It's what makes it a superpower. And I'm so excited to be able to talk to you about it today.
Absolutely. And I'm going to follow up that definition by diving deeper with another question of can you define and give example of what you mean by self-regulate so we can be more clear? When you say self-regulate, what does that actually look like?
Yeah, I think we can go a layer below. So, if mental strength is the ability to regulate your emotions, your thoughts, and your behaviors for productive outcomes. My research has shown that there are 6 core mental muscles for you to self-regulate that equate to mental strength. Those 6 mental muscles that equate to mental strength and thus achievement are fortitude, confidence, boldness, decision-making, goal focus, the ability to stay focused on your goals despite distractions, and messaging. As a leader, the ability to message and exude a positive messaging track and to exude a quality of engagement and presence in your intent and an integrity to your presence and to your intent as well. So by self-regulating these core mental muscles, you increase your mental strength. And here's the thing, so that people aren't intimidated when they hear that. So, you asked, well, Scott, drill down on self-regulation. And I'm telling you, well, there's 6 core mental muscles that you self-regulate. I don't want your listeners, Jeff, to feel intimidated by that, because think about the analogy of going to the gym. When you go to the gym, you don't go to the gym every time, Jeff, with a plan of working on every single muscle in your body all the time, every day, right? I mean, that'd be overwhelming. Wednesday might be leg day. Thursday is, stomach sit-up day and shoulders day and so on. It's the same with training your brain for achievement by working on your core mental muscles. You don't have to do them all at once. You can work on them as needed, building the habits that underlie each one of those. And here's a cool part about The Mentally Strong Leader, the book. If you get the book, you start by taking a self-assessment, a mental strength self-assessment. It's the results to this. It's a kind of a way that you can love yourself. Speaking of the theme of the podcast, right? Because you get the mental strength self-assessment. It's about 50 questions. It takes about 15 to 20 minutes. It's in the book. You get an overall mental strength score, as well as scores on how you do for each mental muscle that I was talking about earlier: fortitude, confidence, boldness, decision-making, goal focus, and messaging. Then, armed with that understanding of where you stand in your mental strength, you can then build your customized mental strength training program, choosing to level up which muscle is right for you and is most appropriate for you, so that you can thus increase your mental strength and your ability to achieve. So perhaps, Jeff, maybe you're a really confident guy, but maybe, making this up, maybe you look at decision making and think like, man, I could be a lot more decisive in my life. Well, that's the muscle that you have to build. So in the book, you actually get all kinds of tools back in the book, The Mentally Strong Leader, that to choose from, they're going to allow you to strengthen that particular muscle, over 50 plus proven tools in general. So that's what I mean by self-regulating and using the tools to build a mental muscle that's right for you to increase your mental strength. Does that make sense, Jeff?
It does. I guess my follow-up is, what does it look like when these things are not self-regulated, I guess? Like, what does that mean? Like when you're not practicing these things, what does that look like?
Yes, that means that you haven't made a habit of doing them. You may do them inconsistently. Let's pick the confidence muscle, for example. You may show confidence at times, or false confidence. You may project confidence because you need to as a leader, but deep down inside, that there's some things that are really just holes are being punctured in your self-confidence. So the answer is to actually build the habits, Jeff, so that you don't experience those moments as many moments of letdown. You can build the habits behind it. And here's how that works. In The Mentally Strong Leader, I have spent a very long time understanding habit building science. And the 50 plus tools that are in The Mentally Strong Leader that help you build your mental strength, they're all based on habit building science in 3 ways. For example, number 1, the first most important way to build a habit is to get repetitions. Just like when you go to the gym and you want to, build your you do curls to build your arm muscles, right? You got to do repetitions. It's the same with mental strength training. You need repetitions, or you need systems and frameworks that will help you get those repetitions almost automatically. So, number one rule of habit building science, it's in the book, The Mentally Strong Leader. For each of the 50 habit building tools, those tools all show up as systems or frameworks that you can follow so you have the habit of doing it. Second, habit building science teaches us that habits never get formed if you don't take the first small step in starting that habit. So every tool, all 50 plus in the Mentally Strong Leader, is equipped with a section titled Your First Small Step to indicate exactly how you should get started in building that habit. And then third, embracing habit building science, we know there's an inflection point when you're trying to start a new habit. What happens in moments of weakness? And there's a section for every tool, over 50 plus habit building tools, titled In Moments of Weakness. So you know what to do, following through on the confidence example again. When you feel your confidence breaking down in that moment and you want to use a tool to help you build it, what do you do when in that moment of weakness? Specifically, what do you do? And there's advice on how to do that when you can feel that, for example, confidence crumbling. So a long answer to your question, but what it looks like when you're not practicing mental strength is you're not habitualizing it. You're doing it intermittently at best, or maybe you're breaking down altogether. And by building the habits to do that, you can avoid that altogether.
That sounds great. I think there's 50 of them, but maybe sticking with confidence, maybe could you give an example of like what kind of habit or what kind of system are we setting up to help us work on confidence?
Yes. So for example, in the Mentally Strong Leader, if let's say in your self-assessment score, again, there's the 6 mental muscles of fortitude, confidence, boldness, decision-making, goal focus, and messaging. You discern, wow, confidence is something I really want to do better at. The good thing is even in the chapter that's all about building the confidence habit, it's all about building that confidence muscle, Jeff. There's a menu of options for you to choose from. Couple of examples from that chapter on building confidence. There's 2 tools, very powerful, that are about, number one, monitoring your relationship with self-doubt, and number 2, a tool for monitoring your relationship with yourself. And I'll explain both very quickly. Notice, I want you to think of the power of that for a second. I'm asking the listener to monitor their relationship with self-doubt, because that presumes that a relationship exists for all of us. And guess what, Jeff? It does. We've seen in my research that even in the most mentally strong people that have the ability to love themselves the most, even those people, self-doubt is present, even if it's buried deep down. And I have a spectrum, a continuum in there that goes all the way from, measuring your relationship with self-doubt to where you're overconfident and self-doubt is buried and you're not being honest about it, all the way to fear of failure paralyzing you. And then in between, being able to be perfectly confident and knowing how to embrace healthy doubt. So there's a tool in the Mentally Strong Leader that allows you to understand where on the self-doubt continuum you are, and it gives you advice on how to manage where you might be on that continuum. Another example in the confidence chapter is monitoring your relationship with yourself. And interestingly enough, Jeff, it turns out there are many pockets of ways that we fail to accept ourselves, which eat away at our confidence. So in the Mentally Strong Leader, in the confidence habit section, if you want to build that muscle, you'll find the self-acceptance scale, which there are breaches in self-confidence that range all the way from, first of all, you're doing pretty good. You're self-accepting on one side of the scale. And it's the highest form of self-regulation because you're regulating your emotions, your thoughts, and your behaviors to feed your self-acceptance of yourself, the self-love that you feel. On the other side of the scale, not so good, where regulation is poor, where you're not doing a good job of regulating your emotions and thought behaviors, lies this evil, insidious thing called imposter syndrome, where we don't even accept ourselves for what we accomplished, who we are, why we are where we're at, and that we deserve it. And in between self-acceptance, which is good on on that scale, to imposter syndrome, which is bad, there's a whole litany of things on a scale, Jeff, that impact our confidence, such as approval-seeking behavior, where we've stopped chasing authenticity and we've started chasing approval, like comparing to others, which is something I still have to work on, Jeff. And I teach the opposite of that, right? I teach this stuff and I still work on making irrelevant comparisons to others that don't matter to me, right? Moving along the scale, we could engage in negative inner chatter, an even more insidious form of self-confidence, beating ourselves up over and over again with negative self-talk. We might even move to the feeling of, I'm not enough. And if I could tell one thing to your listeners right now, within this self-acceptance scale, I'm not enough is one of the most insidious places to land on that scale of all, because it presumes that we're not accepting ourselves as enough. And I'd like to tell you, Jeff, I'd like to tell all your listeners right now that you are enough. And you don't have to take on everything by yourself. And I think that's worth repeating. I want to look right into the camera for those that are watching this. You are enough. And you don't have to take on everything by yourself. And in the mentally strong leader, depending on what your source of lack of confidence is on that self-acceptance scale, whether it's you're seeking approval too often, you're comparing to others, you're engaging in negative inner chatter, you don't feel like you're enough, you have imposter syndrome, there are specific tools to help you overcome each one of those. It all starts with understanding where do you fall in that relationship with yourself and your acceptance of yourself.
Powerful stuff. And I think it just fundamentally jives so well with what I understand and believe as well. But my question kind of follows me into this path around self-awareness. I think a lot of what you mentioned requires, at least in my experience, a certain, above average to do well. I feel like you need this above average sense of self-awareness, not everybody has sometimes, or for one reason or another, we could be lacking it in certain areas that blind us to these issues. So I'd love your take on kind of how we properly go about this journey. It sounds like a lot of these traits and paths to success require us first to kind of part the clouds and be able to see a little more clearly about ourselves and how we're perceived by others.
Thank you so much for that, Jeff, because it gives me a chance to reinforce that it all begins with self-assessment. And of course, Jeff, I hope people buy the Mentally Strong Leader because I'm so proud of the decades of work that has gone into it and the powerful feedback I'm getting about how potent it is. And I hope they take the self-assessment. And even if not, it's the spirit of assessing yourself first. But for example, in the book, there's I was talking about this earlier, the mental strength self-assessment that helps you get honest with where you're at in your mental strength levels. And I encourage you in the write-up of the assessment to be honest with yourselves. But I have a kind of a protected in there as well. For example, I have the assessment in front of me here. I put on my readers here because I'm getting to that age now where I need them, Jeff. It started happening a few years ago. And even in some of these questions that I'm talking about, I'm encouraging the user or the reader to also enroll others in their thoughts about how they're answering that question. So let me just find an example for you here right now. Again, I'm looking at the mental strength self-assessment. So let's see here. Let me just pick one good one here. So, for example, in the mental strength self-assessment, when we get to decision-making, right? And you're going through the decision-making set of questions and there's a good set in there. And let's say you get to this discussion. How often would you or others say you're decisive? So in the assessment, there's built in this safeguard of and an encouragement of be honest in assessing yourself. And even if you're not self-aware, the assessment will help you get there. And to make sure that you don't cheat in your answers, you're not as honest as you can be, enroll those that know you and trust you and believe you and know you may be better than yourselves and ask them how would they respond on a scale of 1 to 5. So for example, how would you or others say you're decisive? You can answer from 1 to 5, from never to always. Now, Jeff, maybe you would answer that one way, but your best friend who knows you very well would maybe answer it differently.
Yeah.
And in discussing that assessment with people who know you well, you can elevate your self-awareness.
Yeah. And I love that approach. I asked that question because as I look at the different parts that you're looking to build habits for, the parts that you're trying to regulate, I think it talks about emotions, thoughts, and behaviors, right? Everything you're saying to me makes 100% clear sense around thoughts, because I feel like as you're building these, like all the exercises you're doing are in your thoughts, and they can help you guide your thoughts. My questions kind of revolve around the other two pieces. The first was behaviors, which we just started talking about, because when it comes to behaviors, at least the way I kind of look at it, behaviors kind of have a two-way interaction, right? Yes, we can manage our own behaviors, but what matters for behaviors is how they're perceived. And so self-awareness is tricky, because you can sit in a room and think about it all day, all you want. But if that's not how you come off to others, you completely lack the understanding of that behavior and how it impacts others. And so you kind of answered that question there. My other piece was around emotions. I think this is really interesting because I think it's maybe a kind of a old school way of thinking of things, but there's the mind and there's the heart, and they seem to, there's a lot of sayings and stories and texts around how these two can be at odds. I always like to say that you have like your logic mind and you have your heart or your emotion mind, and meeting in the middle of those two is like where wisdom really lives. So I'm curious how, building these habits, especially saying the mentally strong leader, to me, it's there's an oxymoron playing here, maybe at a high level, of using like mental strength to overcome or to regulate emotional needs or issues and things like that. Can you speak a little bit to that connection, and whether, like, what kind of synergy is that?
Yes. Especially, excellent question, Jeff, especially with the emotional portion of mental strength, right? And by the way, mental strength is broader than just emotional intelligence. Emotional intelligence, of course, is, being skilled enough to get your emotions to work for you versus against you. Think of emotional intelligence as a slice within the broader umbrella called mental strength, which has to do with not only emotions, but thoughts and behaviors. And it's not just fortitude and resilience. It's also confidence and boldness, decision-making, goal focus, and your ability to message positively to the troops. But, back to your question about emotions, it makes it even out of the three: emotions, thoughts, and behaviors, which are what we self-regulate when we're mentally strong, more than the other two, even, I think. Emotions require systems and frameworks to help you, because they're emotions. And we're human beings, and we often respond in the moment to things happening. And when you have systems and frameworks in place, that's part of mental strength. That's the strong part of mental strength, that chain that ties you to what you want to do, the systems or the frameworks. And I'll give you an example, a perfect example. In the mentally strong leader, let's say you take that mental strength self-assessment, Jeff, and you determine, okay, one of the things that I want to work on is this ability to navigate my negative emotions in the moment. And this happens to all of us, right, Jeff, where we can get in a heated situation for whatever reason. Maybe we disagree with someone. Maybe we're really frustrated with someone. Maybe they're really pushing back and things aren't going well, right? If you could have a system to help control those emotions, that's part of mental strength. And here's an example of a system in mentally strong leader. There's a tool I call the redirect rhythm. I've been teaching it for years. It's been proven and validated over and over again. And here's how it works. It's just a couple of simple steps. If once you practice this, Jeff, I'm telling you, it really, really works. Imagine you're in a moment where negative emotions are getting in the way, and you want to navigate that to a productive outcome. There's 4 simple steps, and they happen so quick that once you start to practice them, you don't even have to think about this system, this framework. It just happens. The first step is first to just create space. Take a breath. Create distance from the intensity of the emotion. The idea here is to break the gravitational pull of the emotion that is dragging you somewhere that you do not want to be. It's people, you often hear, well, hey, take a breath, cool down. There's a science-based reason for that. Because when you don't do that, you're getting gravitationally pulled to a direction you don't want to be. And when you take a breath, you stop the pull for just a second. And then the next step you take is you name the emotion. You ask yourself, what am I feeling? And when you can name what you're feeling, it begins to lose its hold over you. So, Jeff, in that moment, you're feeling, let's say you're feeling really angry with a coworker, really frustrated, and you just stop, you take a breath, you stop letting that gravitational pull you where you don't want to be, you name the emotion. Okay, I am feeling really angry right now. Now that you've named what it is that you're feeling of very quickly to yourself, that anger can begin to lose its hold over you because you've identified what that thing is that's throwing you off. Of course, you go to the next step very quickly, which is to reassess. Instantly, you just say, okay, what's really happening here? What's happening is as you're taking a breath and thinking and collecting your thoughts, right? And as you've named the emotion, I'm feeling angry, you reassess, okay, well, what's really happening? Well, what's happening is, and I'm making up the scenario, Jeff, what's happening is I'm really angry at my coworker because they don't agree with me. And I know I feel like I'm really right and I'm passionate about this point. Then you go to the final step of the redirect rhythm, which is simply to redirect and to say, well, what's next? How do I, and this is key, respond now versus react? When we react, it tends to be emotive. When we respond, it tends to be action-based. And you can take the action towards a more productive outcome. So if you can create space, name the emotion, reassess and redirect, you have created a structure and a system to help regulate your emotions. And the mentally strong leader is filled with tools like that to help you do that. Because like we established up front, Jeff, this ain't easy, but it can be if you build the habits.
That's awesome. I love that. Pretty psyched right now because I'm writing on my list right now. I want to take this assessment. I'm going to go through these things and start. But this sounds like there's a lot of tools that I'm going to have to start practicing building these habits because, I mean, you're selling the heck out of them here in terms of convincing me that this is some good stuff. So, I appreciate it. I wanted to, make sure that our listeners are given the opportunity to understand like what they can do next, first and foremost, they can do right now today, besides going to get the book and all those other things, but where can they start for themselves? But also, if you'd like to build on that, can you just, you've mentioned the book, but how else can they learn more, get in touch with you, or find out more on this journey here?
You bet. They can also, of course, you can find the mentally strong leader at scottmautz.com. And I know that'll be in your show notes. It's Mautz, scottmautz.com. But also, hey, if you want to get started right away, I put together a gift for your listeners, Jeff. Go to scottmautz.com/mentally strong gift, all kind of one word, scottmautz.com/mentally strong gift. And they'll be able to download a 60-page PDF I put together for your listeners that it allows them to go ahead and get started on the self-assessment right now if they want to, without even having had the book yet. And then it also includes prompts and questions that will help you to get the absolute most out of the mentally strong leader, a book I've been working on for, if you think about it this way, almost 3 decades. But they can get a fast start right now by going to scottmautz.com, mentally strong gift.
That's awesome. I'm going to go check that out. I hope everyone's listening will go check that out as well. Very, very awesome opportunity to just get started on this. So Scott, with that, I really appreciate the time you spent today. I really appreciate the wisdom you've shared, and I really enjoyed this conversation today. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for bringing more love into the world, Jeff. It's what we could all use in business, of course, but also in life.
Absolutely. And thank you to the listeners for staying with us and tuning in as always. We hope you enjoyed this. Please check out Scott's book, check out The Mentally Strong Leader, check out Love as a Business Strategy if for whatever reason you are here and you have not. And rate our book, rate this podcast, share with your friends, all those things. I really appreciate all the support. So with that, thank you to our guest, Scott Mautz, and thank you for tuning in. We'll see you all next week.